Hi everybody, it's Maren Bass with another edition of 3D Thursday, a few minutes every week for us to stretch our brains, exercise our minds, and practice what it means to think beyond what we know and what we think we know. Now last week I shared with you what I called the case of the cynical grant reviewer, or box? What box? I don't see no stinking box. And I told you the story about the grant reviewer and grant writer that I knew from an online forum who basically decided that the entire grant proposal review and decision-making process, at least at the federal level, was a complete crapshoot because whatever they recommended as the review panel, the decisions that actually came down were completely different. So his decision, because he was inside his box, was it doesn't make sense. It's political, pulling strings. It's all about, who has the most pull, who has the most influence. And the whole grant review process is just a sham. That was the sense he made of it. Remember, I said I was really shocked that he, in all his years of working in this field, hadn't figured out or hadn't asked, hadn't taken the time to learn what really happens on the other side of the box, outside that box, the part that we can't see. We send the proposals in, we get an award or no award. What happens in the review process? The grant reviewers at the next level send their recommendations forward. What comes back may follow those recommendations. What comes back may be different from those recommendations. What's going on? So I thought I'd take my time here today to unpack for you, kind of pull the curtains back on a typical federal review process. Ooh, I apologize. I see lots of shadow in the back there. The light has changed. It's now later in the afternoon than when I made the earlier video this afternoon. So we'll just deal with that. And I wanted to share with you what could be happening for our poor, cynical grant reviewer. Now, grant review processes take place in many different shapes and forms, so I'm not pretending to share with you this is the way it always happens, because every single grant-making organization, even every department within the federal government, even every program within every department in the federal government will have its own version of what it takes to make good decisions about the proposals that we're being asked to review and what a good decision means. All right, so what I'm sharing with you is one way to make sense of the experience that our cynical grant reviewer was sharing when he said it's just a crapshoot. Obviously, nobody is really taking the point scores seriously. Okay, so here's how that's going to work. I'm going to need to find my markers here. Here we go. All right, so this is where we're starting out. I'm going to move to the side here. And what you see here, numbers 95, 93, 93, 92, 91, 90, 88, and 85 are the scores that a particular review panel awarded to a set of federal funding proposals. Now this is all made up. Let's just say that we're working with a literacy program, a federal funding program for literacy services. I do a lot of work with literacy, so a lot of my examples have to do with literacy. And in this case, they're reviewing, they want to be reviewing, this is the Department of Education, is reviewing proposals to provide basic literacy services in communities around the country. So they have a very clear scoring matrix for the reviewers. The reviewers come together from all over the country. They're reading all of the proposals. Let's just say they had 30 proposals to read. Typically there'd be a lot more than that, but again, just for the sake of the numbers working out, let's just say they had actually not even that many. Let's say they had 20 altogether to read, and against that scoring matrix where every single element of the proposal had a particular number of possible points that the reviewers could award, they read, they rated, they discussed, they made their decisions about how many points, and when the whole thing came out of the mix, this is what you saw. So this is proposal, we'll say, whoops, I'm out of the screen. Proposal A, proposal B, proposal C, proposal D, etc., etc. So they send their recommendations forward to the Secretary of Education, and you might think that however much money the department has to award for this program, they would start at the top. The highest rated proposal scored 95 points. So we should first fund this proposal, and then we'll fund the next one down, and then we'll fund the next one down, and we'll keep going based on the points scored by the reviewers until we run out of money. It couldn't be any more fair than that, right? That's the A-plus student model of proposal review. And I learned early on in my career that it rarely works that way. I would fight and scrap as an A-plus student for every single point. I wanted to know what I needed to do to get the points. The proposals for federal funding were wonderful because it told me exactly what I needed to do and exactly how many points I could get if I did it right. So that was right up my alley. And lo and behold, I was shocked to discover that if I wanted an A+, if an A+ meant getting a grant reward, getting the highest number of points didn't automatically mean I was going to get one. What kind of screwy system is that? I think that's what our cynical reviewer was talking about, right? Here's what I learned. Okay, so we're the review team and we're submitting our recommendations to our funders. And suppose we're also been told that there's only a limited amount of funding and only a few proposals are going to be funded. And in fact, we are not going to be considering, we're only going to be considering those proposals that score 90 or above. So the review team is really clear. They probably are not doing a thorough review for these ones down here, but they're looking for those proposals, really looking to send a list of proposals to the department that score 90 or above. All right, so figuring that this is the pool of funded proposals, again, starting from the top down. All right, so here's what happens next. Let me take this sheet of paper down, and you will see that now I have to stand on the other side again. I'm going to basically disappear while we talk this through. Not only are the points part of the process here, but this might be the kind of map that the department staff might make up to present to the secretary, the assistant secretary who's making the final decision. And this map would say the highest scoring proposal came from the state of Washington. I do a lot of grant training in Washington, so that makes sense, right? They're asking for $120,000 and they want to provide literacy services to the working poor. Proposal number 2 scored 93. They're from Florida. They're looking for $80,000 and they're going to provide literacy services to immigrants. Okay, 93 from Oregon, $110,000, services for youth, 12 through 18. All the way down the list, you can take a look at the points scored. So this is the point ranking, the state from which that proposal is coming, the dollar amount that they're seeking, and not just that they're providing literacy services, but they are providing literacy services to a particular population. Now, why is that important in this process? Why would we want to be mapping this all out if we're the program staff for the Department of Education, if all we're going to be doing is funding from the top down? Well, you might think the dollar amount's important, right? Because you want to only fund up until you run out of money. Okay, that's pretty clear. But here's what actually happens. Let's just take a look at how this works. The United States and its territories are divided into, oh gosh, I forget now, it's either 9 or 10 what are called federal territories or federal geographic regions, and they're grouped by state. So the groupings of states in various regions are grouped together. There's Region 1, Region 2, Region 3, Region 4, etc. There are 9 or 10 altogether. So I will ask you, if we're going to be making, let's say, 5 grants out of all of these that are submitted, how likely is it that 2 of those grants are going to be going to proposals that come from the same federal region? And the answer is not very likely. Why is that? Because the government and the departments that represent the government are really committed to, either statutorily committed to, or in the sense of their own priorities, they're really committed to a fair geographic representation in terms of where the funding goes. So let's take a look at how that plays out here. What do we have? We have Washington, Florida, Oregon, Nevada, New York, Michigan, Ohio, and Arizona. Okay, so we're not really considering these guys here because they fall below our cutoff line, right? Okay, so that's fine. So we're looking at these guys up here. 1, 2, 3. Right in our top 3 we have what? We have Washington and we have Oregon. They're in the same federal region. We're not going to be making awards to both of those programs, no matter how good they are, no matter that they both scored in the top 3. If we're only making 5 awards, we're not going to be funding a program in Washington and a program in Oregon. So we don't know what we're going to do about that. Let's just put little question marks there right now. And we have to move on. Okay, so we go down again, and I think we've got a pretty fair representation among the various regions in the rest of our proposals. So our only geographic question is going to be Washington or Oregon. Okay, now we're still not going to be looking at the dollar amounts just yet, or we're probably going to be playing with the dollar amounts a little bit as we go through here just a bit. But let's say that the next thing we come to is what's called target or focus of the funding. This can be target population. This can be a particular strategy or approach that the projects are taking. Almost always, unless these are formula grants, and formula grants mean there's a predetermined amount of money that's going to be granted to each state, unless these are formula grants, generally speaking, the department issuing the dollars is going to be looking for a diversity of programmatic approaches or a diversity of target populations within that broader focus area of literacy services. So let's take a look at what we have here. What do we have in terms of our target populations? We have working poor, okay, that's our top rated proposals. We have immigrants, okay, we have youth 12 to 18. We pop down here and we have working poor. So 2 of our top 4 are working poor. We have youth 12 to 18. All right, so 2 of our top 5 are youth 12 to 18. We have unemployed, which is different from anything we've seen up here. Okay, so we got a little bit of a pickle here because our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 top proposals, we're assuming we're going to be choosing our 5 funding awards from among these 6 proposals, but 2 of the top proposals focus on the working poor and 2 of the top proposals focus on youth 12 to 18. We are after programmatic diversity, and that means we need to look for ways to open up the number of program approaches or target population sets that we're going to be awarding with these dollars. So right away we are probably going to have to choose between working poor in Washington and working poor in Nevada, and we're probably going to have to choose between youth in Oregon and youth in New York. Wow. All right. So Florida immigrants and Michigan unemployed are looking pretty good right now. They're kind of in the safety zone, if you will. At least we're not raising any questions about them just yet. But what happens here, so now we get to look at the money a little bit. We get to say, okay, if we have to choose between working poor in Washington and working poor in Nevada, is there any way that the amount that they're requesting could help us? Probably not. 120K and 75K. Okay, so all of these are within the funding limits that we've predetermined, all right? There wouldn't be anything up here on this list if it wasn't completely qualified, if we were completely free to choose any one of them, all right? They're totally qualified, totally okay. So these funding amounts are totally fine. But when it comes to how much we can do with what we have, we might want to think a little bit differently. And for instance, we might, I'm not saying we would, but we might say, you know, this $250,000 award from New York, that's kind of tricky for us. I'm wondering if we should set that one aside. Oh, but gosh, we don't have any other proposal coming in from the federal region that New York represents. Wow, that's kind of tricky. Well, let's keep going. Let's keep going with this and see how it works out for us, okay? What about the working poor between Washington and Nevada? Okay, so if we choose not Washington working poor, then we're going to be eliminating Oregon youth, and if we eliminate Oregon youth, then that means we're going to be stuck without any youth programs because New York is probably going to fall out because it's too much money. Eek! Let's just do this. Let's send New York on its way, at least for now. At least for now. That means we're going to give the okay Let me get my green markers. At least for now, we're going to give the okay to the Oregon program because it represents youth. And if we do that, almost by definition, what's going to happen with our top point value program? We're not going to fund both Oregon and Washington. We've chosen Oregon because it's our best option for youth. That means that Washington is out of the running. What? How did that just happen? That's our top rated proposal. I will show you how that happened, guys, because even though I left the points up here for you to look at, the reality is once it gets to this phase, once it leaves the review team, it's possible, maybe even probable, not 100% certain, but very possible that the points simply don't matter. Look at that. Let me take a bolder pen here and cross that out. The points actually go away, and the only thing the decision makers are looking at now are these factors here. Okay? So in reality, what our review team has done by going through the point review process and assigning point values to each section of these programs is that they have pre-qualified a set of proposals to go to the final round for our program staff and our, what am I trying to say, the secretary and assistant secretary to make the final decisions. The points no longer matter. The points are a convenient way of pre-qualifying programs that we are sure meet the standards, the logistical standards of what we want to be accomplishing. And now we just simply drop the points out and all of our decision making happens around these factors here. Ah, what a surprise. Now it starts to make more sense, doesn't it? So just to take this a little bit further, because this is where it really does get fun when we start to work with this. So what have we done? We've chosen, there's our Oregon people. We've chosen them, okay? So if we keep going now, we've eliminated working poor. We've got one working poor. We've eliminated this youth. We've got this youth. We have immigrants and unemployed, but now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 proposals, and we know we can fund at least 5. What are we going to do? We've eliminated all but 4 above that bottom line. Well, who cares about a bottom line? The bottom line is just as artificial as the point values were in the first place. It's a useful construct for organizing the way we're thinking about the process, but in the end it absolutely means nothing, because now we can take a look at this and say, just below that line we also have this Ohio program for teen moms, this Arizona program for Native Americans. We're going to dip down here. Uh-oh, something just happened. We're going to dip down. We want to get something in there for Native Americans. We've got a really strong Native American lobby, and we want to do that. Sorry that there was nothing up here. We definitely want to fund this one. It's just a couple points below the line. Who cares? We're going to fund this one. Native American. Definitely pull that up. That's a high priority for us as well. But look where it comes from. It comes from Arizona. And guess what federal region Arizona is in? It shares with Nevada. Ah! So what are the chances that we're going to be able to fund both Arizona and Nevada? All right, we want Nevada's working poor. We want Arizona's Native Americans. What are we going to do? Well, I think we've taken this example about as far as we need to. I wanted you to see how all we're doing with the points is evaluating the strength of the programs and that the overall program is a good fit for what the funder wants to accomplish. Once we move to the final round, this is just the pre-qualifiers, every point that was awarded in round 1 falls away, and all we're looking at now are these considerations, and they can be region or location, the dollar amount, and the focus of the program. In fact, I've noticed that a lot of federal RFPs now actually and specifically include language that says over and above the points assigned to each of the sections of the proposal, program staff and decision makers will use other considerations in making their final funding decision, including but not limited to geographic location and programmatic focus. All right, so I hope that helps. It doesn't necessarily tell you what to do. And there really isn't, I've worked with this for quite a long time, there really isn't anything to do about this other than to relax a little bit and recognize that it's not a crapshoot, to recognize that it's not politics, whatever that means, as if politics is a bad thing. I'm not sure I understand where that notion comes from. Politics means of the people, and this is definitely of the people. The whole process really is. Or that there's string pulling or, you know, backroom dealing and things like that. Hey guys, that happens too. That's also part of the process. Maybe not this one, but it does happen. All right. So we're really naive if we don't like it when that happens, because that's the way the game is played. And it is a game. We have a game on our side. Our game on our side is get the proposal out the door, follow the rules, and let it and send a qualified proposal out the door. The next game is, as the reviewers, read the proposals, assign points, develop your recommendations. Okay, that's not our game. That's the reviewers' game. And the next game beyond that, when the reviewers have sent their recommendations forward, is take a look at the proposals that the reviewers have recommended, throw the points away, and figure out which combination of projects is going to best meet the overall objectives that we hold for this particular funding in the community, in the country, in the world. Okay. That last piece is true across the board for every single funder. Every single funding process, whatever the review process looks like, always comes down to what combination of awards is going to best meet the specific, what do I want to say, not interests, is going to best fit the way this funder wants to use its dollars in the community. Now, the way they want to use their dollars may be which one is going to give us the biggest bang for our marketing buck if it's a corporate organization. It may be what way is going to demonstrate our loyalty to our employees. Again, corporations love to fund close to home where their employees live and work. It may be something like this, which has a bigger agenda about diversity of funding so that we're not overrepresenting one part of the country or underrepresenting one particular target population. It could be what's going to, what kind of funding combination is going to best help us advance an agenda toward investigating possibilities for reform, for instance. What's going to give us the best information back about what strategies could work well in a reform scenario. I'm doing a lot of work with that in higher education right now. I have for a number of years, where all of our funding is really focused on what's going to give us information that we can feed back into the educational reform program. All right, so there's always another agenda going on. We don't always know what that is. And even if we did know what it is, it doesn't necessarily help us to know it, other than to recognize that it's not a crapshoot, it's not string pulling, it's not backroom dealing. It's always about that question that's not on the review guidelines and it's not on the proposal guidelines, is what combination of awards is best going to support this funder in achieving what they want to be achieving in this funding round. All right. So if you have questions about this, of course, go ahead and email me, Marin@grantsmagic.org, or better yet, post them in the comments box below so everybody else can see them. I love sharing this. I think it's a real eye-opener, and I hope it's an eye-opener for you as well. And again, this is about that box. Remember, this is 3D Thursday. This isn't Marin teaching about good grantsmanship. This is 3D Thursday. This is what happens outside the box that is invisible to us, because of where we are, where we're positioned, and what we're being asked to do. All right? So always know that when it looks incomprehensible to us, based on the box that we live in, there's probably something going on that we don't yet understand. So you now are smarter than my cynical grant reviewer who had 150 federal proposals funded and many, many, many grant review panels for the federal departments as well. He never got this, much less that anything like this was actually happening, and now you do. So that's it for now. I'm signing off until next week. I hope you've gotten something out of this that made you go, Opened your eyes a little bit, stretched your brain a little bit, and looking forward to seeing you all again next week on 3D Thursday.